Stewart continued. She later added, I'm feeling better about the direction of the CBA. I'm feeling better. The owners are finally acknowledging and being receptive to what we want. The players as well. We all had to kind of put our business hats on and get into that mindset. What took so damn long? I just want to understand, why would you not have your business mindset hat on 3 months ago? The season's on the line. That I hear things like that, and it's still absurd. And I'm hoping we can get this thing done quickly so we're not late.
That right there is one of the most surprising statements we've heard from the players' union side in 17 months of CBA negotiations. Breanna Stewart, vice president of the WNBA Players Association, just said something that contradicts almost everything we've been hearing from union leadership. She's talking about business mindsets, revenue-sharing reality, and the cost of missing games. So what changed? Because 3 weeks ago, the narrative was completely different.
Has been one of the most important people to listen to when it comes to ongoing negotiations between the WNBA League office and the Players Association for the next CBA. Stewart is the vice president of the WNBA Players Association. Okay, we all know that. But the league office rectified, it's going to, let's see. Oh, they were talking about a stalemate between the league. Of course, the league did not submit a proposal for 6 weeks because, well, they didn't want to. And I don't blame them, all right? The WNBA players submitted one, and they didn't bother to respond because they were like, are you kidding?
Let's establish the timeline here. For 6 weeks leading into February, the WNBA League office went completely silent after receiving the players' initial proposal. They didn't respond, didn't counter, didn't acknowledge it, and honestly, you can understand why. The players came in with demands that would have required the league to operate at a massive loss before the new media rights money even hits the books. The owners looked at that proposal and essentially said, we're not even dignifying this with a response. But then something shifted. The league sent a new proposal at the beginning of February, and according to Stewart on the Game Recognized Game podcast, this one actually showed movement, real traction. For the first time in over a year, she's using words like excited and finally headed in a direction. That's a dramatic tone shift from someone who's been on the negotiating committee this entire time.
Quote, and that's the thing I've been telling them, is that we're part of now that we're part of a revenue share model, you miss games, it's less money. Interesting. She told people, if you don't take this, we miss games, it's less money. Okay. And not to say that we should submit and just say yes to any proposals that we don't like. But this is a business now, and that's how businesses go.
Now this is where it gets interesting. Stewart is directly telling her fellow players that missing games means less money under a revenue-sharing model. She's explaining basic business economics to professional athletes who should already understand this. The fact that she feels the need to say this out loud tells you there's a disconnect within the union. Not all players are on the same page about what striking would actually cost them. And remember, Stewart isn't just any player. She's a vice president of the union. She's in the negotiating room. She knows what's in that February proposal, and she's clearly seeing something that makes her want to avoid a work stoppage this weekend. That's significant because just days ago, we were hearing completely different messaging from other union leadership.
Naphesia Collier, Nika Agumake, Breanna Stewart. Is there a split between those three? My problem is I almost feel like it would be a 2-on-1 scenario. And of course, I bring those three names up because they're prominently in the players' union. They're on the committee. One's the president, and the other two are vice presidents.
Here's where the internal politics get complicated. Stewart mentions 3 key names in union leadership: herself, Naphesia Collier, and Nneka Ogwumike. All 3 are on the negotiating committee. Collier and Ogwumike are vice presidents alongside Stewart, but their public messaging hasn't been aligned. Ogwumike just went down to meet with Athletes Unlimited players, and the reports from that meeting suggest those players weren't nearly as optimistic about the proposal as Stewart sounds right here. So we have to ask, is there a split forming in union leadership? Is this a 2-against-1 situation? Because if Stewart is publicly saying the deal is moving in the right direction while Ogwumike is meeting with players who seem ready to strike, that's not a unified front. That's a fracture. And fractures in union leadership right before a potential work stoppage are how strikes fall apart.
I'm floored that there was some lucidness there. Did we just get a little glimpse of common sense out of Breanna Stewart? If we miss games, we lose money. That's pretty obvious. I'm just pointing that out. That's pretty obvious, but it is the right mindset to have. The video I did earlier, ESPN interviewed multiple players, got answers all over the place in regards to the CBA. All over the place. Some players acting like they didn't even know what was going on. Other ones saying, I can't afford to lose checks.
Let's talk about what Stewart said regarding business mindsets. She literally said, we all had to kind of put our business hats on and get into that mindset. That raises an obvious question. Why weren't you wearing your business hats 3 months ago? The season has been on the line this entire time. The media rights deal that's supposed to transform this league is already signed. The money is coming. So why did it take 17 months to approach these negotiations like a business discussion instead of a hostage situation? The answer probably has to do with the composition of the negotiating committee. You've got players at very different stages of their careers with very different financial priorities. Ogwumike is 35 years old, near the end of her career, trying to maximize earnings in her final years. Stewart is 30, still in her prime, thinking about long-term league stability. Collier is 28, same situation as Stewart. Those age gaps create different urgency levels around short-term money versus long-term structure.
All right, black and white sports reporters. Well, this is rather interesting. And for those of us that are hoping to get to watch Caitlin Clark play basketball this season, it's a decent kind of update. Like an update that seems like maybe some of these players somehow, some way are actually pulling their heads out of orifices, and that the CBA talks may actually be moving forward in a positive direction. And listening to these comments from Breanna Stewart, I got to be honest. I cannot imagine with these comments she's making right here that...
Now let's address the elephant in the room. The players pulled this CBA opt-out card one season too early. They should have waited until after the 2025 season, when the owners would have actually received that first massive media rights payment. At that point, the owners would have seen real profit for the first time in league history, and the players would have had leverage to demand a larger cut of something that actually exists. Instead, they opted out before the money arrived, which put the owners in a defensive position. The owners are looking at this negotiation thinking, you want us to commit to paying you a percentage of revenue we haven't received yet, based on viewership numbers we're not sure are sustainable, before we've seen a single dollar of return on 26 years of investment. From a business standpoint, that's a tough sell. And here's the thing about that media rights deal. It's worth $2.2 billion over 11 years. That's $200 million per year, which sounds massive until you break it down per team. 12 teams means each team gets roughly $16.7 million annually from media rights. That's before you pay player salaries, staff, travel, facilities, and everything else. The margins aren't as huge as players seem to think.
And yeah, we can fight for a while, but if the money's looking good, and let's be real, the money's looking a lot better. The money is looking a whole lot better. And now the housing thing has been to a point addressed. And the players, they sound like they kind of like where that's at now. I mean, I don't blame the owners in this at all. Why wouldn't you want to know? And I've said before, the players pulled this card too early. They pulled it a season too early. They should have waited and let the owners get some of that media rights money, so the owners could look and go, "Oh wow, we actually turned a profit for once." And then the players would have actually they had a little.
Stewart makes another critical point about revenue sharing that shows she understands the stakes. She says if they miss games, it's less money, and that's not just about losing paychecks during a strike. Under a revenue-sharing model, every game that doesn't get played is gate revenue that doesn't get collected, merchandise that doesn't get sold, and viewership that doesn't get delivered to advertisers. All of that reduces the total revenue pool, which means the player's percentage of that pool is a percentage of a smaller number. This is basic math, but it's clearly not basic to everyone in the union. ESPN interviewed multiple players recently, and the responses were all over the map. Some players said they didn't even know what was happening in negotiations. Others said they couldn't afford to miss paychecks. A few said they'd fight for a while, but would cave if the money looked good. That's not a united front. That's a group of workers who haven't been properly informed by their union leadership about what they're actually fighting for.
Where they would get net revenue off of that. Net revenue. If they turn a profit, they get a cut. And because I've said this is the opportunity for owners to finally make money, is the new media rights deal. We've talked about the fact that, yeah, tickets is great, merch is great, gate revenue is great, but nothing comes close to the media rights money. Nothing. And viewership, which, of course, you got to have the viewership in order for the media rights deal to stay where it needs to be, because advertisers, if they don't bring in the viewers, advertisers will approach the league and be like, look, you got to find a way to give us free commercials. Don't think that happens? Advertisers have done it to the NFL when the NFL has failed to deliver the ratings they thought they were going to deliver. Odds are some advertisers are going to come calling around the halftime of the Super Bowl. I can tell you that right now, especially U.S. advertisers when they found out that 18 million U.S. households turned off the halftime show.
Let's talk about what the players have reportedly secured so far, because it's not nothing. The housing situation has apparently been addressed to a point where players sound satisfied. That was one of the major sticking points, and it seems like the league made real concessions there. Players wanted individual housing rather than shared accommodations, and it sounds like the February proposal moved significantly in that direction. The owner's perspective on this makes sense. They wanted to see proof that the Caitlin Clark effect wasn't just a one-season fluke before committing to massive salary increases and benefit expansions. They wanted to know if the viewership would hold, if the attendance would sustain, if the merchandise sales would continue. They wanted data, not projections. And honestly, that's reasonable. These owners have been funding losses for over 2 decades. They deserve to see actual profit before being asked to commit to even larger expenditures. But here's where the players have a point too. The media rights deal is signed. The expansion fees are coming in. The league just added Golden State and Toronto, and those expansion fees go directly to the existing teams. We're talking about $50 million per expansion team, which means $600 million total gets split among the 12 current teams. That's $50 million per existing franchise. That money is real, and it's coming regardless of viewership.
Yeah, the NFL made it up globally. Advertisers in the U.S. don't give a shit about that. That's where all this is tied together. I mean, you gotta, the owners that propped up the league for so long, they want to make sure it's not a blip on the radar. They want some stability. And the players should want some stability. The problem is you got so many players at the tail end of their careers, and they're trying to make a bunch of money real fast. Well, it's probably not going to happen. You're probably going to have to make a bunch of money real fast with Project B. I think that's why you're seeing Nike Agumake go to Project B. She's at the very end of her career. She's going over there trying to make a couple of mil.
Now here's what makes Stewart's comments particularly significant. She's essentially breaking ranks with the hardline strike position that seemed to be building momentum last week. When a vice president of the union goes on a podcast and says she's feeling better about negotiations, that the owners are being receptive, that they need to get this done quickly to avoid being late, that's not strike talk. That's settlement talk. And the timing matters. We're days away from the season opener. Training camps are supposed to start. If Stewart is publicly softening her position now, it suggests the February proposal contains something substantial enough to change her calculus. Maybe it's the housing situation. Maybe it's a revenue-sharing percentage that's actually workable. Maybe it's guaranteed contract language or improved free agency rules. Whatever it is, it moved the needle for someone who's been in these negotiations from day one. But this creates a problem. If Stewart is moving towards settlement while WNBPA is meeting with players who sound ready to strike, the union has a messaging crisis. Players need to know whether they're preparing to play or preparing to walk out. You can't have vice presidents sending contradictory signals 72 hours before the season is supposed to begin.
I don't know, but I've got to admit, that's about the most surprising, positive update coming from the player side. The problem is, it doesn't sound like all these players are on the same wavelength as to how positive this is. Because Agumake just went down to meet with Athletes Unlimited and those players down there, and it doesn't sound like they were much on board with the proposal that they got. That's the other interesting part we're going to have going forward, is going to be watching players potentially start calling each other out in public. It's already really happening, but eventually names are going to start being attached to some of that. Not anonymous sources. Tell me what you think. Peace.
Let's address the bigger picture here. The WNBA is at a genuine inflection point. The league has real momentum for the first time in its history. Caitlin Clark brought mainstream attention. Reese created compelling rivalries. The playoff ratings were legitimately impressive. Attendance was up across the board. This is the moment the league has been building toward for 26 years. And that's exactly why a strike right now would be catastrophic. You don't walk away from the table when you finally have leverage. You don't shut down the league when casual fans are finally paying attention. You don't kill momentum right when it's building. Stewart clearly understands this. She's saying it explicitly. This is a business now, and businesses don't shut down during their growth phase. The players who are pushing for a strike seem to be thinking short-term. They're focused on maximizing their current contracts, getting their money now, making up for years of low salaries, and that's understandable on a human level. But strategically, it's short-sighted. The real money in this league is going to come from sustained growth over the next 5 to 10 years. If they strike now and damage the momentum, they're cutting off future earnings to grab a slightly larger piece of a smaller pie today. Think about what happens if they strike and the season gets delayed or canceled. Casual fans who just started watching because of Clark don't stick around. Advertisers who just committed to the new media deal start asking for make-goods. Networks that paid $2.2 billion start questioning whether they overpaid. Expansion cities start wondering if they made a mistake. The entire growth trajectory gets disrupted, and it takes years to rebuild that momentum. Stewart gets this. She's 30 years old with potentially 5 to 7 more prime years ahead of her. She's thinking about what the league looks like in 2028, not just what her salary is in 2025. That's the business mindset she's talking about. That's why she's pushing back against the strike narrative. Here's what this all comes down to. The WNBA players have more leverage right now than they've ever had in league history. The viewership numbers are real. The attendance growth is real. The media rights money is real. The expansion fees are real. They're negotiating from a position of actual strength for the first time ever. But leverage only matters if you use it correctly. And threatening to strike right when the league has momentum is using leverage incorrectly. It's the equivalent of a tech startup threatening to shut down right after their product goes viral. You don't kill growth to prove a point. You capitalize on growth to build long-term value. The February proposal apparently recognizes this reality. According to Stewart, the owners are finally being receptive to what the players want. They're acknowledging the new financial landscape. They're putting real money on the table. And most importantly, they're negotiating instead of stonewalling. That's progress. That's what 17 months of talks were supposed to produce. Now the question becomes whether the rest of the union follows Stewart's lead or doubles down on the strike threat. If Collier and WNBPA align with Stewart, the deal probably gets done this week. If they don't, we're looking at a genuine work stoppage with all the damage that entails. And let's be clear about what a strike would mean. It's not just missed paychecks for players. It's not just lost revenue for owners. It's damaged relationships with networks, with sponsors, with fans. It's momentum that took decades to build getting destroyed in weeks. It's casual viewers who finally started paying attention, deciding the league isn't worth the drama. It's everything the WNBA has worked toward for 26 years, getting put at risk over what might be relatively small differences in a proposal that's apparently already close. Stewart seems to understand this, She's talking about getting deals done quickly, about not being late, about revenue sharing meaning less money if they miss games. She's thinking like an executive, not just like a player. And that's exactly what the union needs right now. Leaders who can see past the immediate emotion and recognize the bigger strategic picture. The owners have been propping up this league for over 2 decades. They've absorbed losses year after year, kept teams afloat in markets that couldn't sustain them, invested in infrastructure and development and marketing. They've earned the right to see actual profit before being asked to commit to even larger expenditures. But they've also seen the numbers from last season. They know what Clark brought to the league. They understand that the financial landscape has genuinely changed. So here's the real question. Can both sides recognize that they're finally on the same side? The players want more money. The owners want the league to succeed. Those aren't contradictory goals anymore. The league succeeding means more money for everyone. The media rights deal proves that. The expansion fees prove that. The attendance numbers prove that. This isn't a zero-sum negotiation where one side wins and the other loses. This is a growth opportunity where both sides can win if they're smart enough to recognize it. Stewart's comments suggest she recognizes it. The February proposal suggests the owners recognize it. Now we just need the rest of the union to get on board before they blow up the best opportunity this league has ever had. Because if they strike now and kill this momentum, it's not coming back. Lightning doesn't strike twice. The casual fans who tuned in for Clark aren't going to wait around through a labor dispute. They'll move on to the next thing, and the WNBA will go back to being a niche product struggling for attention. That's what's actually at stake here. Not just this season's salaries, but the entire future trajectory of the league. Stewart gets it. The question is whether everyone else does too. We're about to find out.